let's go ahead and get started. Thrilled to be with this impressive group of panelists today. We're going to be holding today's webinar on the topic of supporting student mental health and emotional wellness. My name is Jason Johnson. I represent the WhyTry organization. We're the group that has been hosting these. We're an SEL organization. We've been around for about almost 20 years. And we started doing these during the pandemic when it hit back in about April of last year. We've done over 30 of these, and it's just been a really fun way to network with some incredible humans throughout the country and really globally. We get people outside of the United States on these as well. I am the lucky one that gets to host and moderate most of these, and it's just been a treat for me to be able to do that. And I'm particularly looking forward to this one today because this is a topic that's definitely near and dear to my heart, and I've been so impressed with our panelists. So let me go ahead and introduce our panelists. First, we have Dr. Loretta Whitson. Dr. Whitson directs the California Association of School Counselors, CASC. It's a nonprofit state association that provides policy recommendations, guides schools towards linking school counseling to their overall mission, as well as leading school counselors in engaging in high caliber research-based practices associated with school and student success. CASC is the largest state school counseling organization in the nation, and Dr. Whitson was instrumental in the founding of that in 2000. She earned her EdD in 2014 in organizational leadership from the University of LaVerne, and she served as assistant professor and chair of LaVerne's educational counseling program from 2015 to 2017 prior to receiving her doctorate. Dr. Whitson has spent over 25 years as a school district administrator and school counselor in the Monrovia Unified School District, a district located approximately 15 miles northwest of downtown Los Angeles. Welcome, Dr. Whitson. We are thrilled to have you.
I am thrilled to be here. Thank you so much.
You bet. Next, we have Tony Watkins, LMFT. Tony is a marriage and family therapist licensed in Alabama and Kentucky and is an AAMFT clinical fellow and AAMFT approved clinical supervisor. Tony is the clinical director of the CU Well Counseling Center, the outpatient practice of the Masters in Marriage and Family Therapy program in Campbellsville University. Tony utilizes his 19 plus years of clinical experience providing support for clients with suicidal ideation, couples with conflicted relationships, adolescents and adults with varying relationship, mental health and substance abuse disorders, and children with behavioral problems. As a trainer and consultant, Tony is a master trainer for assessing and managing suicide risk, applied suicide intervention skills training, question, persuade, refer, the QPR model, and mental health first aid for adult and youth. He has provided AMSR training to thousands of mental health professionals and as a master trainer and provides T for T's to train new trainers as a partner in the continuing education training company, Interactive CE Training. Tony provides CE training on a wide variety of mental health professional topics and consults with communities and organizations to create suicide-safer communities and provides training for professionals and non-professionals across the country. Welcome, Tony.
Well, thank you. So honored to be with everybody. Saw some folks from Kentucky and Alabama, so a little bit like home week here. So
I love it. And then me, I'm Jason Johnson. I'm the lucky one that gets to moderate these. My background, for those that have been on a few of these before, you've heard before, so I won't go into too much detail. My background is I'm a school psychologist. I came from public ed before I came over to the WhyTry organization. I've been with WhyTry for about almost 6 years now. I oversee training, research, and development, and just feel really grateful to be able to be with all of you. So with that introduction, I want to get right into it. We're going to target going for about an hour today, and there's a lot to talk about, and I'm so excited to hear from our panelists. What I want to do first is just hear a little bit from you both. Tell us tell us a little bit about what your current role is and the work that you've been doing around mental health with that. Feel free to talk about how that might have changed or how it's looked over the past year, dealing with that through the pandemic. Let's start with Dr. Whitson, and then we'll go Tony after that.
Yeah, as long as you call me Loretta from here on out, we'll be good.
Deal.
Okay. It's been such an interesting time. And so in regards to mental health, and the best since the pandemic, and just what we do as an association representing school counseling, 11,000 school counselors, 6.2 million students in California. So we have a big population, 1,000 school districts. So that gives the perspective. So we're like a nation state and working on the things, and it's been challenging for school counselors, it's been challenging for anyone in schools, but I think if I could say the upside of things would be that, how do you get the world to understand about mental health? Have a pandemic, and so we can understand now, and some of the messaging and pieces that within our profession that we've tried to do, we're now being asked to tell them more. People want to learn more about how to provide these kinds of safe zones for children and others in regards to mental health.
Awesome. Thank you. Tony.
Yeah, as a clinical director for the university, we have a master's in marriage and family therapy program. It's in Kentucky. And my focus really since the pandemic was how do we deliver services to our clients? I have student interns providing mental health services. Fortunately, about 2 weeks into the pandemic, I had all of our students up doing telehealth services. We provide over 300 session hours a month, and we're not a real large program, but we are serving people from across the state of Kentucky. More recently, been working with Jefferson County Public Schools, JCPS. They're in Louisville, working with family resource folks, trying to imagine how we could support families around mental illness, educate them from a systemic perspective. Marriage and family therapists are systemic thinkers, and we work systemically. And just really the whole area of telehealth is really what I've been focusing on, other than my primary university responsibility over the last year or so, including how do we use telehealth, utilize what we have to deliver services to students in communities where maybe there's no other mental health providers. So I'm really excited talk about silver lining. How do you expand understanding of mental health? You have a pandemic. How do you expand the use of telehealth to expand mental health services? Have a pandemic.
Thank you. That I think is a great lead in to where I want to go next. I want to jump right into it. So the kind of the makeup of the attendees that come to these webinars with us, all typically revolve around people that are doing some type of student support or some adult support in here. But I think kind of the critical mass are a lot of educators and education support with some good mental health specialists mixed in. Wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you think schools and school districts could be doing or should be doing to promote and contribute to positive mental health support for their students, and maybe even how you see SEL, social emotional learning, intersecting with that. Let's flip the order for this one. Let's go Tony and then Loretta.
Okay. Yeah, I think, there's kind of this renewed focus on SEL. I've been a therapist, since about 2000. Spent a lot of my time supporting schools, developing systems of care across the state of Kentucky within school systems. I got introduced to WhyTry. WhyTry is kind of, for me, the gold standard of SEL. and I've utilized the tools, the lessons of WhyTry. I know that they've been widely used in school systems, but it's kind of, I think there's going to be this new energy, renewed energy around how do we support social and emotional learning in our kids. I think it's as important that we're focusing on our staff, the teachers. Teachers they've gone through a lot of transition, a lot of, it's been a difficult year for everybody. So my hope is there's going to be a lot of PD around self-care, ways to integrate what they already know. We have great educators across the country, and just encouraging them, supporting them so that they can be in a place where they can support their students. I may not have answered your question directly. I think I got a little bit lost there.
No, that was great. Thank you. Great insight. Loretta.
Yeah, and Tony, yes, insightful. And just to add to it, because I could say ditto on everything you said, but I think it's also having to do with not only setting school climate and working with teachers and all the staff who are struggling, but having systems and triage where you're able to identify. I think we're going to have we are, and we will for months and months to come, needs to have systems to know when students are needing additional care. So like doing universal screening would be one of my recommendations. How, there are systems out there. There's simple ones. I'll give you one that I used when I was a district administrator, and just especially in a secondary level, so what you can do at elementary is just identify a couple kids that are we had them identify 2 kids that are acting out, and then we called 2 other kids acting in, because those are usually the ones that get missed, is the ones that aren't causing disruption, but they might be disheveled, or, there's depression and things like that. And teaching the teachers how to identify that. And then we would do like a 4th period, and then we would repeat it at a different period and see if similar kids bubbled up. And so that didn't cost us any money, but we just designated a day to do that. And I just truly believe we have to figure out, and it's going to be difficult, who is hurting and what kinds of treatment is needed. And like someone said, we don't have enough therapists across the nation. We don't have enough therapists. We don't have enough of those. So what do we do in the meanwhile? How do we handle those kinds of cases? And as school counselors, school social workers, school psychologists, or bringing in licensed people to help us with that. So
awesome. Hey, Loretta, quick question. You used the term, and I love that you used it, acting in. I think most people are familiar with the term acting out, and they know what that looks like. There may be a few people on here that might be a new term to, and I think it would be really helpful for them. What does acting in look like if a teacher wanted to spot that?
Well, if you're doing not in-person lessons, so you're on some sort of virtual lessons, it can happen in just very subtle ways, with kids saying, like we had one kid say, I don't know why this is all worth it anymore. That would be kind of a call for help, but it's very, very slight, and we don't know. It could be that normal behavior, which is going to be hard to detect. That's why it's so difficult from being away from kids or having a new set of children that you don't know. So change in behavior, acting in, could be sleeping in classroom, just not being kept up, not seeming to be around friends, and a loner. Those kinds of things are warning signs, could be warning signs that we need to have systems where someone else besides, sometimes we have a teacher, and there's a big responsibility on a teacher, and they're doing a lot of SEL, which is wonderful. But what do you do when you're not sure? And when do you know when you're not sure about a kid to have other people look at them?
Awesome. Thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I love that term. And I think it's helpful. It's a nice kind of, I think, broader perspective for what we can be looking for in how to support our kiddos. Let's talk a little bit about ideas you might have? What are some things that schools could do to more effectively partner with resources and help communities better advocate towards good mental health support? I think the pandemic has forced us in a good natural direction that way, but now we've kind of got to figure out the how. What ideas do you have about that? Let's go Loretta and then Tony.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult, to be honest, when but I think that there's been creative things to do. So I think probably for those that are in the education field, a big issue for all of us, and I suffered with this too. When I had a child that I'd get a family to say, we're going to go to therapy, so great. And then I kind of give them the list of people that I think are good. And it's sort of like a go with God moment, it's like, and then we hope, that they get there. So having, so we do having a warm handoff, building relationships with people in the community that you could reach out to, and that there was a way of sharing. So some of the issues having to do with FERPA and then HIPAA, and how do we communicate with each other, working that out so that there is a sharing, so that we actually know if they are going to a counselor and they're getting that kind of services. So ways of building infrastructure. One of the ways I did it in the school district is I actually hosted a lunch meeting once every 2 months with all the practitioners in the area. I provided lunch for them, and I had the school counselors, the school social workers, and school psychologists at the table, and we talked about things. And as we got to develop relationships, it made it easier for us to share and then have touch systems for families in the community.
I love that. So you actually brought the resources into the schools so the schools could meet them, see them, and kind of connect through it.
Yeah.
Great idea. Tony.
Could you repeat? I forgot.
Yeah, no worries. Talk a little bit about any ideas that you might have about how schools can more effectively partner with resources and help communities better advocate towards good mental health support.
Well, I love Loretta's intentionality, and and that's exactly what it's going to take. I think there's so many resources in the community that are just untapped. We're not, maybe the school systems for different reasons, feel like they can't reach out to them. An example is the faith community. I worked with Health and Human Services this last year on a 6-month project around, recovery, treatment, and the faith organizations. How do we integrate those resources together? And I think the same is true in maybe not every community, but a lot of communities across the country. There are churches, faith organizations that, hey, we're here. We want to be a support. We want to help. How can we help? And I've gone into communities and have done training, lay training. How do you connect with kids? What are some, one model I teach is the CARE model from PCIT, child-adult relationship enhancement. I've gone in, because I've done work with WhyTry so much, I've gone in and shared some WhyTry tools. And if we can break past whatever that invisible barrier is between the schools and the organizations in the community, and how can we support each other? I think that's just an untapped, opportunity for school systems.
Yeah, thank you. That's one of the things that's always been so impressive about your model, Tony, is kind of how you're so effective at reaching across those lines. A lot of us have these kind of invisible borders around what we do, but the reality is these kids don't exist within the silos that we create. Their challenges and their mental health struggles intersect across all these areas. And so the better we can kind of support and collaborate one another, I think the better we can support these kiddos. That takes me, so here's where I want to get into it now. Several of you have probably noticed the world of education and mental health it's like a whole different language. We're built around acronyms and models and these different ideas. I think it can feel a little bit overwhelming at times for people that are involved in education that may not have a background in this. And sometimes that can feel a little bit scary, like I don't even know where to start. I was wondering if you both could talk about some specific ideas or strategies that you have for how educators that might not have a background in mental health, but could still help improve and support mental health in their individual classrooms and offices. What are some things that kind of the lay educator could do to help support that? Let's go Tony and then Loretta.
I was trying to respond to somebody in chat. Somebody asked about what did I mention? It was PCIT, parent-child interaction therapy. It's a therapeutic model. It's not a screener or an assessment tool. So again, I'm gonna have to, I have a little ADD in case you didn't know that, Jason. Could you rephrase that question for me?
I'm happy to. We're looking for specific ideas or strategies that you could provide to somebody that may not have a background in mental health, but that they could put into play that could help support positive mental health and improve mental health situations for their kiddos in their classroom or in their office.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mentioned it already, the CARE model, CARE, child adult relationship enhancement. And this is a paraprofessional model that comes out of PCIT, parent-child interaction therapy. And really it's one model that teaches the caregiver, the adult, what does this child need from you in their interaction so that they can develop a greater sense of agency. You know, we all want our kids to learn to self-regulate. But what do? Most, even in the classroom, oftentimes because of our frustration and we're overwhelmed, no, don't stop, quit. No, don't stop, quit. No, don't stop, quit. And we're not really helping that child or those children gain a sense of agency. And PCIT and the CARE model, they teach an approach to paraprofessionals or parents. Here's what the child needs in their interaction with you so that they can learn to start self-regulating. And, you know, we have in our school systems available to us PBIS, positive behavioral instructional supports. That it's a model. I don't know if every school is familiar with it, but it adds that structure that if a school will commit to it and implement that system of PBIS, I have seen it dramatically change a school building in less than a year's time.
Awesome. Thank you. Loretta.
Yeah, 1 out of 5 schools in the United States have PBIS. It's a good program. I ran it out of my district. So I just want to underscore that. It's something, a lot of materials are on their website and some things to do about systems. But what came to me when you first said this, Jason, is the first word that came to mind. So I just have to say it is listen. You know, so listen. We have to go into this year listening and figuring out ways to listen to each other. So the kids try to find their, you know, and there's ways I was seeing in the chat, like mindfulness. There's a lot of programs out there. There's a lot of things that can be taught. I think that we have so many external locus of control, meaning that kids are so used to the likes on their, you know, whenever they say anything, and there's all kinds of, and then if they're not getting that stimuli, then how do they feel with their esteem? And they've been to themselves in a lot of ways, except through these exchanges that have been virtual. And so how do you create, you know, circles? Restorative circles is another one, you know, so ways for kids to talk around each other and give topics, and for teachers and others to allow for that. You know, I think Social emotional learning is, and that piece also embeds that, right? There's a listening piece to it. And my fear is that we bypass that because we're so concerned as administrators, concerned with learning loss, recovery, kids on track to graduate, all those things that, how do we create systems that allow for listening and reflective responding, help teach them, kids how to do that with each other. And then there's a lot with peer supports too that could happen in these kinds of things, because I think we're it's like a reset button, like when your phone doesn't work and you have to reset it, and you push the little thing. I think we're like, it's not like we're not in like even the idea of recovery, is, a recovery phase. I don't think it's a recovery phase. I think it's a reset. And how are we going to be? We don't know, but I think we're in this for a long time, whatever it is that we're going to be entering into for kids. So
that's awesome. Thank you. I know a few people in the chat have brought up some questions about PBIS. There's a lot of online resources available for that. But what it is it's a model that really is trying to go all in on using the positive side of things to motivate kids out of a positive response rather than an environment where behavior is driven by trying to avoid negative consequences. And it's really powerful. If for those, there's kind of different tiers of it. Ideally, a school goes all in and kind of supports it throughout, but even like a classroom teacher can do some PBIS practices individually in their classroom in a useful way. I noticed, Loretta, when you mentioned restorative circles, that brought up some intrigue. It's something that I'm a huge fan of. Can I put you on the spot again and ask you to just briefly kind of let people know that may not be familiar with that term, what that is, and why that can be an exciting approach that can help with listening and all these other things you've described.
Yeah, and I would suggest you look at, I just, YouTube it too, because you can actually see, there's actually a really great video that I've seen with kids that are from Oakland, and they're coming back from being incarcerated. And so the circle of people around them welcome them back. And what they usually use is some sort of device like a talking stick, which I love because it sort of helps create the energy around listening. Because, so if you're talking, then you have to have the stick and you pass it along. And so there's almost like a community that gets built in these. And so, and there's quite a bit, there's an International Restorative Practices Institute that does trainer programs and things like that, which I've recommended. I actually, and I'll just say this, and I'm admitting something, my frustration, because I was over principals, I had principals basically for the last part of my career as administrators, and I took them through restorative practices. I said, go for 4 hours because I wanted them to understand it. And I was always pretty, with not all of them, but some of them really, frustrated. I'll say it that way with them. I wasn't tolerant like I should be. All the things I practiced, I didn't do with them because I didn't like some of the things they do. And literally when we did these restorative circles, we started to cry. And I had to look at myself and think, I was so like unempathetic for them. And it really helped me learn them. And I thought all these years I've worked with them and I didn't know who they were because we were, as a principals, we'd have principal meetings and we would talk about other things, that had to do with the school, but I didn't know who they were. And I was judgmental and I had to, and that stopped me. I said, this is part of what I needed to learn in that circle. So that's what happens.
Awesome. Thank you. They are very, very powerful that way. I love that you mentioned that too. That was always a thing that struck me as a school psych. We have these concepts that we become firm believers in as far as like we administrate them with our kiddos.
Yes.
Well, all of these things, if there's a benefit for the kids, it probably benefits us as the grownups as well. PBIS between us as grownups is helpful. mindfulness between us all is helpful. Restorative circles is helpful. One of the things that comes up in trauma informed models all the time, like almost all of them, have this sense of safety and this place where individuals can exercise a voice in things. And I think everything you described lines up with that really well, where it creates space for kids to have a voice and be listened to. That's powerful.
We started, I just have to say, just that we used it I convinced the superintendent to use it in our principal meetings. And so we started using this as part of something, so we got to be connected with each other. And my principals ended up starting to use it with their teachers too, and allowed for us to really give voice to who we are as people, and that brought the humanity back with each other.
I love it. That's powerful. Let's talk for a little bit now about the kind of preparing for the transition that some of us are currently in, but it will continue to be a process, with the vaccine coming out. Most states are now pretty actively working towards a return to class model if they haven't already. And I think the mental health professionals that I've spoken with have all kind of collectively expressed some concern that we're going to see waves of mental health challenges with our kiddos as we bring them back. And I think that's something we want to be prepared for, regardless of our title or position here. So I wondered if you could share some ideas that you have about, as we prepare to finish out this year and go into next year, what are some things that we could do to support the mental health of our students and our staff kind of through this transition into whatever this next phase is, either of the pandemic or if we can get to a post-pandemic situation. Let's go Loretta and then Tony.
Big question too. Thank you. It's important.
Yeah.
I think that we've got to somehow normalize the trauma and destigmatize mental illness. And what I mean by normalizing the trauma is that we've all experienced this at some level. And we've got to have ways to do that with everyone. And when we come back, and that by destigmatizing, then our students know where to go for help. And that just becomes part of the resources at a school. So the destigmatizing would also be to seek out a counselor or seek out, anything like that. Or to teach kids, so if you have to teach kids, because where does kids go? The first place they go, especially, our secondary students, when they have trouble or they have anxiety or whatever, they tell their peers, right? And then does that get trickled down to someone to tell in order to help, without being a snitch, So we've got to figure, I think schools should spend time in these kinds of, whether it's lessons, whether it's assembly kinds of things, whether it's, getting to know and for kids to feel safe, that they can go to someone to tell either about a friend that they're concerned about themselves, and we did a thing too that I thought was very helpful. After 4 suicides in my community, in 2 years period of time, we started a group, we called it Healing Connections, and we got an award for it at the state level. I didn't intend on that, but it ended up being that because we put students in charge of telling us about mental needs and doing activities to help the whole student population understand and destigmatize. But we had kids there talking, and then we had community, we had the mayor, we had board members, counselors, and we would meet regularly to help. And they owned it. And when they owned it, I think it helped for the community. It didn't become ancillary to what the school was doing. It was front and center because the students were saying, this needs to be front and center. This is very important to us. And that's what I would suggest.
That's awesome. Thank you. Tony.
Yeah, I concur with Loretta. As much student-led activities as you can, support and encourage. Many people may be familiar with sources of strength. That's a model that I know in Kentucky we've taken into many communities. It's peer-to-peer, and it's about students having other students that they can go to and count on them to be safe with them, and knowing that, hey, I may have to go talk to an adult about this. I swim in the world of suicide intervention and prevention, and that's one of the challenges. Middle school, particularly, high school not so much, but still some. Well, I promised I wouldn't tell anybody that he said he was going to go home and kill himself. And so when I go into schools and do presentations for the students, that's always front and center. Is, there's some promises you just can't keep. But the whole student-led piece, I think we can even bring that down into elementary to some extent. I've seen it work effectively in some elementary schools. But yeah, the whole destigmatizing, whether you want to call it mental illness or sadness or, just life. We need to destigmatize life because it's tough.
Absolutely. Tony, I was wondering if you could talk. I know one of the last times we talked, you shared a little bit about the student telehealth model that you've been running. I was really impressed. I thought that was actually really brilliant. And I think there's some people on here that would be interested to hear a little bit. Would you be willing to share a little bit about what you've been doing with that and kind of paint a picture for how that's functioned? Because I think it was really creative through this. And I'm guessing it's a model that hopefully will be able to continue to be a source of support, even after everybody's returned at a more normal level.
Yeah. So in our program, our master's program, our student interns who are training to become therapists have been providing telehealth services. So that's one model. I think, Jason, maybe what you're talking about is I was talking about a model of providing mental health services to public school systems.
That's exactly yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So I know Connecticut and this is not my model. I just know about, what they're doing in Connecticut. They've set up where any school district throughout Connecticut who would like to set up a telehealth room, and depending on the size of the school, the number of students, they may have more than one telehealth room where a student can go in and in private have a mental health counseling session with somebody who may be 300 miles away. Our university, our campus is in Louisville, but we're talking with providing services to people across the state of Kentucky. So technology is really catching up with just a few years ago, there were a lot of places that they may not be able to do telehealth because there just wasn't the bandwidth, the technology wasn't able to bring the services there. That's still true in a lot of places across the country. There's a lot of places where telehealth won't work. But in Kentucky, there's been legislation passed. It was Senate Bill 1 that mandates mental health counselors in the schools across the state of Kentucky. It's an unfunded mandate. So I'm working with the Department of Education in Kentucky and some other stakeholders, about how can we implement good mental health care for some very, very rural areas across Kentucky that maybe don't have even one mental health professional in the community, but yet we can schedule these. Telehealth does open up a whole new world of mental health services, medical services. that we weren't utilizing before because it was so far out there. But guess what? Telehealth opened Pandora's box, and we're not going to put the genie back in the bottle. We just need to be creative.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the key in a lot of cases, and that may end up being, part of the solution to the challenge that was mentioned earlier in the chat. And I think we talked a little bit about it, but just the fact that there is a shortage in a lot of school districts, specifically on mental health professionals. And so I think if we can get creative and be able to partner up with some of these resources, especially if we have a telehealth model that kids can even benefit from, that may be what we move towards. But that's a kind of exciting model as well. From the WhyTry model, our approach is built on this thing we call the new 3 R's. And one of the new 3 R's is this concept of relevance. And relevance involves kind of a generational relevance as far as how we communicate to our kids. We want to communicate in a way that's generationally relevant to them. And honestly, like, digital forms of communication that's not foreign to our kids. It's more foreign to us than it is to our kids. And so I'm hoping we can kind of take the best of all worlds and kind of work towards an eclectic approach that really does benefit our kids at a high level.
Well, Jason, I can tell you this because I teach a 15-hour certificate course, technology assisted services for mental health providers. And the research, there's no doubt that the effectiveness of telehealth mental health services is just as effective as in person. There's some caveats that, we always have to assess for the appropriateness of telehealth services. My area of specialty is working with individuals who are at very high risk of suicide, people who've come out of the hospital after a suicide attempt. And so many therapists say, oh, there's no way that you should ever provide telehealth services to somebody who's at such risk. Well, if you're all they got, that's your only option. And that was the case over COVID. So you're going to tell me you're not going to provide your clinical services because you're afraid? Know what you know, utilize your skills, and add in the layers of protection that you got to add in to make sure that if there's a crisis, you can get help for that client wherever they are.
For sure. Thank you. I want to circle back around to something we started to discuss earlier, but it's kind of come up again. And again, these topics can feel heavy and overwhelming to anybody, but especially if somebody's an educator that doesn't have that background in mental health services or understanding, it can feel like a lot. I was wondering if we could talk about any tips or strategies that you have for educators to be able to see warning signs. What are some things that educators could be looking for, and what can they do if they see some of those warning signs for kids that are struggling? Because sometimes it can feel like we're on an island in the world of education. We have our classroom or our office or our client list that we're working with, and it really can feel like we're on an island. So let's talk about warning signs to look for and things we can do if we see those warning signs that could even benefit somebody without a mental health background. Let's go Tony and then Loretta.
Okay. Well, and Loretta kind of put everything in a nice, neat capsule earlier, acting out, acting in. But avoiding or missing schools, changes in academic performance, sleeping in class, extreme outbursts. There's a litany of them. I don't want to go through them all, but I think those are some of the kind of the more overt things that we can look for.
Yeah.
Thank you, Loretta.
Yeah, ditto on that. But I do have to say something, because I'm looking at the chat and I'm saying, a lot of people say, but in here we don't have the support, or, you know, I'm reading, it's going very fast, and it comes up and I might see a part of a chat, but I guess what's coming up for me is that, then what? You know, then what do you do if you see it? You know, I mean, where do you go? I mean, it's, you know, if you don't have the resources, someone had said earlier that I have a mental health counselor coming twice a week, you know, well, sometimes things don't wait twice a week, right? You can't relegate it. But a good friend of mine who's a attorney with ACLU that did the Counselors Not Cops document, a very good document. He says, Loretta, he goes, when they don't fund mental health enough mental health people, it's really a civil rights issue. And I thought, wow, that was you know, it's just the way he framed it and thought about it was, you know, because I'm so much into the forest of it, that we just make do. But if anything, with the money that's coming down with the federal money for every state, so we have in California also extra money, but I have 11,000 school counselors working in my state, 15,000 more with current credentials that or license, whatever you call them, in our state, and they haven't been able to work because there was not the political will to hire them. Now I'm seeing right and left people hiring. That money from feds will be here through August 2024. So you can put that money into hiring if your state allows for that money to trickle down to you. And it would be my advice to all of you is to say something to your school board, your superintendents, you know, directors and program people to say, how are you using that money for mental health? We cannot make do in a crisis. You know, you're giving us a little sailboat in a hurricane, and we need something with a motor, and we need a lot more resources right now, because even if they do see it, then if we don't get them to services and there's no one to really have a catch system for, what are you going to do with it? So that's my pitch. It's time to act. It won't come around again in our generation, this opportunity to strengthen your employees in your schools to really be dedicated towards mental health.
Thank you.
Jason,
Go ahead, Tony.
I just, before I lose it, what we know from research about crises like SARS or school shootings or tornadoes tearing a community apart is 12 to 18 months after the crisis is over that there's a significant spike in mental health needs and suicide. Our crisis isn't over yet. And Loretta's absolutely right. The fever is still in the future. And so, you know, everybody that's on this training, all the work that they're doing, their communities are doing, what WhyTry is doing, what Loretta's doing, we cannot prepare enough for what we're going to see in the next probably 18 months from now.
Thank you. And I'm so happy you framed it that way and shared that with us, Loretta. I think that is a really powerful statement and a really powerful call to action, that this really is, you know, those resources are civil rights for our kids. You know, if we believe in FAPE, a free and appropriate public education, we should also believe in supporting these kids' positive mental health support. And I just love that. I was wondering, we've still got a few minutes left. I was wondering if either of you had any specific resources, whether these are in the form of websites. I know we've shared a lot of information, and we're gonna put up your email addresses after if anybody wants to reach out directly to any of us. But I wanted to know if either of you had any other resources that come to mind that you care to share with our group here that might be a valuable or a useful resource right now as we move forward, you know, really trying to support positive mental health for our kids. Let's go Loretta, then Tony.
So we did the fire, the house is on fire, so it's the neighborhood approach. We all got our garden hoses out, and this happened right when COVID-19 began. And this was between Wisconsin and California. We created a website just for this. And we've had this resource. I'm going to put it in the chat so you'll be able to get to it, but it's basically has to do with COVID and counseling. And that has just morphed into, we have had, I think over, last time I heard, 68 countries had been on the website. We have had hundreds of thousands of hits on it, and a state and national acclaim for it. So, and it was just about maybe 200 practitioners who we began to say, what is the needs? Here's, not just lessons, but here's resources, here's things you can download. We wanted it to be replicatable. We have we're doing a mental health week for students in May, just to focus in resources. And we have a lot of resources that have to do with that. So I'm going to put that in. I think it has, if there is anything that I know about resources, when I find a resource, I put it into that website so people have access to it. And
awesome. So it's kind of an aggregate of resources.
Yes, absolutely. Right. From where we had George Floyd and race. And so we have a whole now drop down on that. We have teacher in services, parent in services, the PowerPoint, we say, just put your name on it, go, so
that's awesome. How did you want to share that? Are you going to put that in the chat?
I'm going to put it in the chat right now.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
How about you, Tony?
I find myself going to Child Mind Institute quite often. I really like their resources. They're an independent nonprofit dedicated to, transforming the lives of children around mental health and learning disorders. And I found that to be a reliable source that's good for the generalist.
Awesome. Thank you. And then I actually have one that I am going to share. We've shared this in the past, but I feel like it would be timely to share it right now as well. We have a parent guide to resilience that has been really well received. And what it is, we take our model of resilience that we have in our book and in our material, and we've broken it down into an online guide that's designed to be shared with parents, because, most of us are supporting kids, but when we work with kids that are swimming in difficult waters, oftentimes they come from families that are swimming in difficult waters and parents that are struggling. And so, even though we support primarily the kids, if we can get tools in the hands of parents, that's a huge help. I'm going to put this in the chat tool right now. It's the link is WhyTry.org/guide. I just put it in the chat tool, and that is a free resource we want to share with all of you that are attending. Take a look at it, and it's a parent guide to resilience, kind of a nice tool. We would love to have you use that, and feel free to share it with your parents of your kiddos and use it in your own families as well. I've used it with my family, and it's a great resource. So I wanted to get that out there. We are almost out of time. So I think I have two final thoughts. I'm going to sneak one in. We talked a little bit about what we wanted to discuss. I'm going to catch you off guard. I told you I wasn't going to surprise you with any questions, but I'm going to surprise you with one right now, because I feel like this topic it can feel overwhelming, and my heart really does break for the educators that may be hurting right now and that are doing their best and still just feel really, really overwhelmed, or maybe they feel unsupported. And geez, I'm going to get emotional talking about it. What I'm going to ask you, Tony and Loretta, is if you just imagine, let me be the avatar. What advice would you give a teacher right now that wonders if they're making a difference, that wonders if they can do it, that wonders how they're going to do it over these next few months? What would you say? What would you say to that educator that's feeling overwhelmed? Let's go Tony first, and then Loretta.
This is what you were created to do. Keep showing up and get the support you need as you go through it.
Thank you. Loretta.
What I tell teachers too, and others, is that if you felt like everything was great, then something would be wrong. And so this is absolutely normal to feel traumatized by this, and that we need help, and we need to, to find ways to get self-care in, whether it's setting up systems of self-care and things that can be done in the school setting. I would be knocking on my principal doors for those things and to be creative about ways to do that. Too, and having people that they can talk to and feel safe about what's going on with them and forgive themselves for what they can't accomplish. Because sometimes I think the trauma is also self-induced because we expect so much of ourselves. So we think, oh my God, they're behind here, and then we have this, and this one's not coming to school. They haven't showed up. There is so much to be concerned with. And we have to have time also. What I find with the people working in schools now is that they're working like till 7 or 8 at night, and they're working early in the morning, and they don't have any boundaries. And so I'd say, you have to give yourself a place to rejuvenate, the weekend, or, a certain hour where everything is turned off so you can have time to resettle. So.
Awesome. Thank you. And Loretta, if you don't mind, it probably got buried in the comments. I think a few people didn't catch that resource that you shared. If you wouldn't mind putting that in there again. And I'm going to add my voice. I would say that to all you educators, these kids are lucky to have you. You're making a bigger difference than you maybe think you are. And that any connection you have, even those emails that you send, those home visits you make where they don't answer the door, all that adds up, and your efforts are not for naught. Let's close with this question. I'll give you your choice. Either share something that's given you hope right now, or share a success that you've seen that you're particularly proud of that's taken place during these pandemic months. Let's go, Loretta, and then Tony, and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, thank you for allowing us to be here first. So thank you, and thank you to WhyTry, Bruce, and all of you. I've known all of you for years and years, so it's wonderful to be here. So I think a resource, I'll just do that, there was one, and if you go on the COVID-19 website that I shared, we did a mental health reopening book. I think it's about 16 to 20 pages long with resources, and it kind of walks, and it was for superintendents. So we sent it out to the 1,000 school superintendents in our state. And we heard back that they loved it. It was sort of a guide to, what do you do first? What do you do second? What do you do third? And we did it in phases. We figured there is going to be this initial phase. And so I think you'll really find it valuable, and we had quite a few people that were, thinkers that really wrestled with what would really need to do if we were going to go back, and when we go back, and how we would handle it from our perspective, because administrators have their perspective, others have theirs. And so how do we make sure that this is included, the emotional well-being of everyone on the campus, including, we address teachers and other faculty members that need to be assessed and figure out what to do. So
awesome. Thank you. Tony.
Yeah, I'm just going to have to piggyback off what Loretta had, because I've had several personal wins and university wins, but I think Loretta's resource is probably going to be the most helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to put up some slides now with contact information. And as we play those out, I just want to go ahead and wrap this up. And first of all, huge thank you to our panelists. Please give them a big round of applause. Thank you so much, Tony and Loretta, for your time. This has been a very active chat, and people have repeatedly expressed thank you for the resources that you shared. And then huge thanks to all of our attendees that have showed up. You all are the real heroes here, and what you're doing is so important. And I'm so proud. Like, I've never been more proud to be part of this network of educators and mental health support. It's been so inspiring to watch what everybody's doing. And we're going to make it. We're going to keep supporting these kids. We're going to keep putting our whole heart into it and giving it everything we got. And just thank you all so much. So give yourselves a round of applause. That's all I've got. Thank you so much. Again, Tony and Loretta, thanks for joining us. As you can see, we'll keep these slides on rotation.